So 50% of millennials are in favor of banning abortions after 20 weeks, according to the National Journal. And so clearly they understand that abortions at 5 months are inhumane and wrong for multiple reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is that by 20 weeks, the fetus is scientifically proven to feel pain. So some have been proven to feel pain as early as 16 weeks, but the scientific consensus is by 20. So don't say like at 20, because they can feel it earlier, but say like by 20 weeks, they can feel pain. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard of this. It's called the Pain Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. It's kind of a mouthful, but you can also call it the 20-week ban. And basically, this is legislation which protects unborn children who are capable of feeling pain from abortion. And currently, there are 19 states that have protections in place at 20 weeks. No states in New England have it, but I'm in Ohio right now, and they have it. So while we've been doing the tour here, we've been saying, this ban is in place in Ohio and 18 other states, but we are advocating for this ban to be put into place nationally. So on a federal level in the whole country. Okay, so the goal with this display is basically to advocate for the 20-week ban. So it's the U.S. House of Representatives has voted in favor of it, but a national ban has yet to be signed by the Senate. So that's really what we're pushing for. And so basically at the display, we'll have the different panels that explain different aspects of fetal pain at 20 weeks. And then we'll also be collecting signatures of people who support this ban. One of our tour displays yet, so it's bigger than a trifold poster. It's actually I already packed it up to ship, but they're big panels and they're put on big X frames. So the first one just discusses what we're doing. So it basically talks about Roe versus Wade and Doe v. Bolton, about how those made abortion legal through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason whatsoever. And then it asks the main question of the display, which is, can't those who call themselves pro-life and pro-choice agree that abortion should be illegal after a fetus has been scientifically proven to feel pain? So that's basically the question that we're asking. And then if people say yes, then you can ask them to sign the petition. And if people say no, then you can ask them, why not? Or can you explain what your thoughts are on that? So like I said, 19 states have it in place, but we are one of 7 countries to actually allow abortion after 20 weeks. And the other 6 are one of the Koreas. I think it's
North Korea,
China, Vietnam, and a couple others. I don't remember, but it's not that important. But basically one of 7 countries, which is really sad. Okay, so the second slide panel talks about science and what science says. So it goes through the anatomical, behavioral, and physiological proof that show that fetuses can feel pain by 20 weeks. So this is all very scientific and medical, but I'm just going to read it for you shortly so you know exactly what those 3 aspects are saying. But there is a short description on the actual panel. So in terms of the anatomical response, pain receptors are present throughout the fetus's entire body by no later than 16 weeks after fertilization. And nerves link these pain receptors to the brain's thalamus and subcortical plate by no later than 20 weeks. So all of the pain receptors are there, but there's not proof that they're actually linked until 20 weeks. And a neurologist at the University of Toronto, his name is Dr. Rinaldi, says that for fetuses, 20 weeks is a uniquely vulnerable time since the pain system is fully established, yet the higher level pain modifying system has barely begun to develop. So because this modifying system is not fully developed, this means that the child can actually feel pain more intensely than adults can. So in a second, I'm going to tell you what the D&E abortion actually is, but I think I told you at the last training. Yeah. But basically, imagine that pain, but actually stronger than what we would feel it right now on a little child. So that's anatomical, basically talking about pain receptors and this modifying system. By 8 weeks after fertilization, the fetus can react to touch. And by 20 weeks, the fetus actually reacts to stimuli that would be recognized as painful if applied to an adult human. So they can do this by recoiling, by flinching, by jerking, all those sorts of things. And this is proven by surgeons who have actually entered the womb to perform corrective procedures on children. And so they've actually seen these children react. And ultrasound technology has also shown that fetuses at 20 weeks and earlier react physically to outside stimuli like sound, light, and touch. So we know that they're responding to outside stimuli, and then also internally by anything that touches them or scares them, things like that. And then the physiological proof is that the application of painful stimuli is associated with significant increases in the stress hormones of the child. And so actually during some fetal surgeries, anesthesia is administered to the child, and it is then associated with a decrease in stress hormones compared to their level when the anesthesia isn't present. So if you think about it, these children who are like technically wanted and who doctors are trying to save will actually use anesthesia on them because one, they know that they can feel pain, and two, because it makes it harder for the doctors to perform these procedures if the child is flinching and recoiling. So that's why they have anesthesia. The third panel, I explained this procedure at the apologetics training, but so a dilation and evacuation abortion is done between 13 and 24 weeks. So it's not like the latest term abortion procedure, but it is done at this time when the child can feel pain. And so laminaria, which are used to dilate the cervix, insert a large suction catheter like a vacuum to empty the amniotic fluid. You use the forceps to tear the body apart and basically dismember all of the limbs. And then you actually crush and remove the skull with the forceps. And after all the body parts are removed, you use the curette, which is that sharp looped knife, to scrape the uterus and remove both the placenta and any other body parts that are remaining. Abortionists will reassemble the body to make sure that all of the pieces are there, and then the mother is sent home. So again, I'll have the abortion instruments there. If you want to have them out, they were really impactful on all the campuses that I went to this week. And basically it can just show, exactly what the child is responding to in terms of this pain. Okay, good. So the fourth panel actually talks about the ones who are responsible for these procedures. And so it breaks down a rough estimate of the number of late-term abortions committed in a day from a study in 2014. So note that this study is several years old, and it's only counting what's actually reported to the CDC. So lots of states that allow late-term abortions, like California and Missouri and some others, don't actually have to report their numbers. So that's why this number is actually lower than reality. But basically, of the over 650,000 abortions reported to the CDC in 2014, over 8,000 of those were done 20 weeks post-fertilization or later. So that underestimated statistic is roughly 23 per day. So that's at the top of the panel. And then the bottom shows faces of some of the men who were actually responsible for these abortions. So by putting, a little bio of them and their pictures on there, we want to show that, yes, late-term abortions do actually happen. And these are some of the people who are performing them. And each of these, the people pictured, so Leroy Carhart, Kermit Gosnell, who the new movie is about, Curtis Boyd, Warren Hearn, and Michael Arthur Roth. What was I going to say? They have all harmed or even killed women. They've committed infanticide, and they've been involved in malpractice lawsuits, among other atrocities. So not only are they performing abortions, but they're performing illegal abortions. They're killing women. Late-term abortion is not rare, and it's not a clean business. It's not normal. It's not clean. It's not like an in and out procedure. It's pretty bad. So that is that slide. And we will have a resource binder that has more in-depth bios and like citations of the charges that have actually been brought against all of these abortionists. So if anyone asks, we have those in a binder. Nice. They're actually, these are the worst of the worst, but we wanted to include them so that people know. And then the last panel asks, are you in the majority? So the statistics on this panel can be a good place to find common ground with people. And that's because it is the proof that supports the question that we asked on panel 1. So ignore the typos on the slide. But basically, we know that America is divided on many issues, yet one of them that Americans can generally agree on is putting limitations on abortions after 20 weeks. So the 2 statistics I'm about to tell you are about limitations after 12 weeks, which is obviously earlier than late-term abortion and earlier than this 20-week ban. So 60% of people who identify as pro-choice support limiting abortion after 12 weeks. And across the board, there is 76% for banning abortions at 12 weeks. So that's 60% of pro-choice people, and then 76% like total of all people. And so that's 12 weeks, not even 20. So if you can imagine what the number is at 20, it's got to be higher. And so, like I said, no states in New England have the ban right now, but there is a map on the panel at the bottom, and all of the states in purple have the ban right now, and all of the states in blue do not. So there are 19 purple, and then the rest don't have them.
I do have a question. For the 60% of people pro-choice who are supporting limiting the abortion after 12 weeks, so is that for across the nation or just for like particular states?
Like the people who support it, millennial statistics, like 52% of millennials support it, and then this is 60% and 60% of pro-choice Americans, and then 76% of like all Americans. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Also, what year is that map up to date as of?
That is a good question. I think 2018.
Oh, nice.
I have it cited, but I already packed the binder to ship. I believe it's a 2018 poll.
Cool.
Okay. So those are the panels, and then I'll just run through the resources that we'll have at the display. So the 2 pictures on the left are the front and the back of a bookmark that we have. So it uses our hashtag #TheyFeelPain, and it says, the U.S. is one of 7 countries to allow this, and can't both sides sort of agree on this. And then it has a link to sign the petition online, but we'll also have paper copies. And then the back has a quote by a doctor that says, "By 20 weeks, an unborn child is fully capable of experiencing pain. Without question, abortion is a dreadfully painful experience for any infant subjected to such a surgical procedure." So that's just a pretty impactful quote. And then it does have a medical diagram of like the forceps being used on the child. So those are the bookmarks. We have a ton, so hand those out. Like I said, we have a resource binder with everything cited. We even have embryology textbook references. So I don't have the books themselves, but I have like the ISBN numbers and a picture and the title and all the details of a bunch of embryology textbooks that prove all of these facts. I'll have the fetal models as well, and then the curette and the forceps. And then we also have buttons that say, "I am the 76%. And I think this actually got left off of the panels on accident, but like I said, 76% of Americans support banning abortions at 12 weeks. So we have little buttons upstairs, but it says, "I am the 76%, and you can pass those out to people. Yeah, and then we'll have the petitions to sign. So do you guys have any questions about the materials we'll have? Okay.
Good.
And then a couple, I just talked about these with you guys, about the apologetics. So just reviewing how to approach controversy. You always want to find common ground and discuss compassionately. You want to listen, and then if needed, find a graceful way to exit. And just keep in mind when you're talking to people that they may not remember, the arguments that you give them or the scientific proof, but they will remember how you made them feel. So always try to not feel to make them feel not threatened or judged, just engaging in conversation. So the last thing of this PowerPoint is just to talk about some of the challenges to fetal pain that we've experienced with the display, so you know how to answer them if they should come up. So there are 3 main claims that have come up. So the first one is that in order to experience pain, a functioning cerebral cortex is needed, but the nerves don't link up to it until late in pregnancy, well after 20 weeks. So for this one, I'm not going to read the whole description, but basically there's substantial medical evidence that in the brain, it's actually the thalamus rather than the cerebral cortex that is principally responsible for pain perception. So while the cerebral cortex may affect the reaction and modulation of perceived pain, there are children who are born missing most of their cerebral cortex, and they can still experience pain. So the nerves link pain receptors to the thalamus by 20 weeks. So that's sort of the argument to claim 1, is that it's not just the cerebral cortex, it's mainly the thalamus, which is present by 20 weeks. And then the second claim, this one's easier, is that during gestation, the unborn child is asleep or in a coma-like state and therefore cannot experience pain. And for this one, there has long been documented reactions of unborn children to painful stimuli. And so an unborn child, when they're touched, will awaken. And earlier, like I said, fetal surgeons have found it necessary to sedate the unborn child with anesthesia to prevent them from thrashing around in reaction to an invasive surgery. So why would they do that if the child didn't react to the pain? Which is kind of obvious. And then the third one is if someone were to say there's scientific consensus that the unborn child does not experience pain until the 3rd trimester, we can say that, in fact, the claim of this consensus is based on publications by abortion practitioners and advocates, not independent or objective scientific sources. So if someone says that, you can ask them, oh, what scientific consensus is that? What sources are you using? Not in a condescending way, well, who's telling you that? But just oh, I'd love to hear, what research you've been looking into. And then you can refer them to the embryology textbook list that is in the binder. And then, like always, the other common challenges are life of the mother and what about rape. So we have those topic cards on hand. Let's see. And in that situation, you could, if you can't get them to agree at all, you could ask them if there is an exception clause in the 20-week ban for the situation of rape or life of the mother, would you sign the petition to ban abortions after 20 weeks? Because that can help you see where they're actually coming from. If that really is the reason why they disagree with the ban, or if they're just going to disagree for any reason. The next one is, some people might say that, these abortions are only for a small percentage, which is around 1 or 2%. And yes, that's true. It's not the most common abortion procedure, but that's still 6,000 to 10,000 lives that we can save every year. So obviously we want to save as much as we can, and that's a very high number of lives that could be lost. And the last one is, if a woman is getting an abortion this late, isn't it usually because a fetal anomaly has been detected? And it can be, but not necessarily. So at 20 weeks, that's generally the time when doctors can tell if the child has an abnormality. That's when you can tell the gender. That's when you can tell a bunch of these different disorders. So that is a common reason why abortions occur this late. But Leroy Carhart, who's one of the late-term abortionists, has actually explained that he will perform an abortion for any reason if the woman feels it's right for her. So, like, it's not the only reason. There are so many reasons, and these abortion doctors, they don't ask. They're not like, oh, do you want this abortion because your child might have a fetal anomaly? They're just going to do it. And more importantly, also to stress with this question, is that being born with physical or mental disabilities does not justify abortion. And so that sort of just goes with the fetal anomaly apologetics, how we've discussed. We didn't go too much in depth in the Apologetics 101 training, but if you have any questions about any of those exceptions, you can let me know, and I will also be there to answer or help at the actual display. I think that's it. Do you guys have any questions? If they say, like, yes, I would sign the ban if those exceptions were in place, then you know that they agree with, like, the 20-week ban. They're being honest about opposing abortion at 20 weeks, with the exception of those 3 cases. And so they're probably, you know, an actually compassionate person who believes that abortion is wrong. They just are compassionate towards the mother's situation. But if they say that they still wouldn't sign it, even if those exceptions were in place, then it probably means that they're not going to be open to dialoguing or discussing anything with you, and their stance is not going to change because it's not actually from a position of compassion toward the mother or the child. Yeah, any other questions?